State.
Host Speaker News Anchor Voice. Cybersecurity HQ Weekly News Report, March 26, 2025. Host Speaker News Anchor Voice. This week, the digital world, well, it's not just changing, it's practically hemorrhaging. Host Speaker News Anchor Voice. Critical systems are vulnerable, AI is turning into a weapon, and time, as always, is running out. Host Speaker News Anchor Voice. We cut through the noise to bring you the intel you need to stay ahead. Welcome to your high bandwidth briefing. We're going deep this week, extracting the key cybersecurity insights from all the data of the past 7 days. We've got critical issues with Kubernetes and Cisco, some pretty murky claims about an Oracle cloud breach, big moves in browser security, that whole AI threat thing escalating, geopolitical cyber risks going up, and of course the economic factors that always seem to be shaping how we defend ourselves. So let's just dive right in.
Yeah, the pressure is definitely on. And from multiple directions, we're seeing some seriously sophisticated attacks targeting the core infrastructure that we all rely on. And at the same time, the speed and scale of these threats are getting amplified by AI. This isn't a gradual shift, it's a rapid convergence of a lot of bad things, and it means we need to fundamentally rethink how we approach security.
Kubernetes is such a foundational part of cloud deployments these days. So when Wiz researchers announced those critical vulnerabilities in the NGINX Ingress Controller on March 25th, it was a big deal. We're talking about potential remote code execution here, which means an attacker could basically run any commands they want on your Kubernetes systems, just as if they were a legitimate user. And that could lead to a complete takeover of those environments. If you're running anything substantial in the cloud, this hits close to home.
You can think of the Ingress controller as like the traffic cop for your Kubernetes apps. It takes all those requests coming in from the outside and directs them to the right services inside your system. But these vulnerabilities, they essentially give control of that traffic cop over to the bad guys. And the fallout here, it goes way beyond just one compromised container. If they successfully exploit this, attackers could move laterally across your entire microservices architecture and even get into the underlying infrastructure itself. It reminds me of all those concerns we used to have about container escapes and needing really strong isolation, a problem that's been dogging the industry since, well, the early days of Docker, really.
Right, so it's not just a quick patch and you're done kind of situation. This is a wake-up call that even with these well-established orchestration layers, you need to be constantly on guard. Immediate action is needed here. Patch every single affected NGINX Ingress Controller version. And at the same time, you really need to be watching your ingress traffic for anything unusual, any patterns that might be a sign of an active exploit.
Yeah, that historical perspective is important here. I mean, Kubernetes was designed to provide a more secure and scalable way to manage containers, right? But when you get vulnerabilities at this level, it just shows that complexity itself can create new attack vectors. Back in the day, everyone was focused on securing the container images themselves. Now, and rightfully so, the attention has shifted to these critical management and networking components.
All right, let's move on to another big piece of the enterprise infrastructure puzzle. Cisco, since March 20th, CVE 2024-2439 and CVE 2024-2440, both in their smart licensing utility, have been actively exploited. The attackers are after unauthorized system access, plain and simple. Given how widespread Cisco gear is, this has implications for pretty much every sector out there.
The Cisco devices are often found at critical points in a network. They control the flow of traffic, they provide essential services. So if the licensing utility is compromised, attackers could gain a significant foothold. From there, they could move laterally, disrupt services, or even manipulate the licensing system itself, which could potentially lead to huge outages that look like they're just normal technical glitches. The fact that these vulnerabilities are already being actively exploited, well, it just highlights how urgent it is to address them.
The immediate response here is clear. Patch your Cisco Smart Licensing Utility deployments, ASAP, no delays. But beyond patching, this really underscores the importance of network segmentation. If your Cisco infrastructure is just sitting there in a flat, poorly segmented environment, these vulnerabilities become much more dangerous for attackers. And it's also crucial to implement granular endpoint detection rules specifically tailored to monitor the behavior of the licensing utility itself.
And there's another thing that's particularly concerning here. There's a correlation somewhere between 0.65 and 0.70 with those Okta and Kaseya compromises we saw in the past. This isn't just a coincidence. It points to a pattern of attackers going after enterprise SaaS platforms and infrastructure management agents.
Right.
They use these as initial entry points, and then they leverage those footholds to pivot deeper into the target's networks. It's a calculated and repeated tactic, and we need to be ready for it.
That's a pretty unsettling picture of targeted exploitation. Now, let's shift gears and talk about the cloud, where there's been some disturbing news regarding Oracle. On March 25th, CloudCI came out with evidence that supports claims of a significant data breach from Oracle Cloud. We're talking about 6 million records potentially compromised. And this is all happening despite Oracle's public denials. Regardless of the specifics, this situation really erodes trust in even the biggest cloud providers.
Yeah, whether or not this specific incident is ultimately confirmed, the fact that it's even being alleged highlights the inherent problems with the shared responsibility model in cloud security. There's often a lack of transparency about what's going on within the provider's infrastructure, and making sure everything is properly configured and secure on the customer side, well, there remains a major challenge.
The takeaway for anyone listening is that you need to take a hard look at your cloud provider risk profiles. How much visibility do you actually have into your cloud environment? Are you actively monitoring for any unusual API activity? And are you strictly enforcing the principle of least privilege for all your identities and access controls within your cloud infrastructure? The source material we're looking at here draws a strong parallel, a 0.85 similarity, to the Capital One breach. What does that tell us?
Oh, the Capital One breach, that was a watershed moment. It exposed just how catastrophic the consequences of misconfigured cloud environments can be, particularly when it comes to overly permissive IAM roles. In that case, those misconfigurations allowed the attacker to move around freely within the environment and steal huge amounts of sensitive data. This high similarity score suggests that these basic cloud security hygiene failures are still happening, and they remain a very effective way for attackers to get in.
So let's switch gears again and talk about browser security, where we're seeing some interesting developments. Island, the startup that's all about secure enterprise browsers, just raised a massive $250 million in funding. That puts the company's valuation at a whopping $4.8 billion. Their whole approach is to build security controls directly into the browser itself. Why do you think there's so much interest in this right now?
Well, the traditional network perimeter is fading away, that's for sure. With more and more people working remotely and using cloud applications, employees are accessing sensitive company resources from all sorts of devices and networks, and they're often doing it directly through their web browser. Island's approach makes sense in this context because it's moving the security controls closer to the user and closer to the data itself. The browser has become a critical point of access, often the primary way people interact with company assets.
So from a strategic planning perspective, this means that secure browser solutions are something that organizations really need to consider, especially for high-risk users and teams that are spread out geographically. The real strength of these secure browsers seems to be in their integration with existing tools, like data loss prevention, DLP, which prevents sensitive data from leaking out,
Yeah.
and cloud access security brokers, CASB, which control access to cloud applications. It all adds up to a more unified and robust security posture at the endpoint level.
Exactly. It's about creating a secure and controlled pathway for people to access web-based resources. And it reduces our reliance on those traditional endpoint security agents, which, let's face it, can sometimes be bypassed or disabled by clever attackers.
All right, let's talk about AI now, a world that's evolving rapidly and becoming increasingly weaponized. Some research that came out on March 23rd revealed that DeepSeek R1, which is a pretty notable large language model, is completely vulnerable to prompt injection attacks. And I mean completely. Every single test they ran was successful.
That's a worrying statistic, and it really highlights a critical weakness in the way many large language models are currently designed. With prompt injection, an attacker can manipulate how the AI behaves just by crafting very specific, often disguised input prompts. And this isn't just some theoretical problem, it's a real threat. As LLMs get integrated into more and more enterprise applications for things like analyzing data, generating content, even developing code, the potential for abuse becomes significant. Just imagine an attacker exploiting an AI-powered tool within your company to steal confidential data or run unauthorized commands on your systems.
Yeah, defending against this requires a multi-layered approach. You need to limit how much autonomy these LLMs have within your systems. Strict sandboxing is a must to prevent them from interacting with sensitive systems or data without very specific controlled permissions. And it's also crucial to explore and implement AI security wrappers that can monitor and control the data flowing in and out of these models. These wrappers can look for signs of malicious injection attempts, acting as a sort of safeguard.
And to add to the urgency here, Nikesh Arora, the CEO of Palo Alto Networks, recently pointed out that threat actors are now using LLMs to create exploit chains for known vulnerabilities, like those listed in the CVE database. And they can do it in seconds.
Wow, that completely changes the game. We're not talking about days or weeks for an exploit to become widely available anymore. It can happen almost instantly, which drastically speeds up the attacker's capabilities. Our defenses need to become much faster to keep up.
Absolutely. This means we need to move away from relying solely on static signatures of known threats. We need AI-powered detection tools that can analyze system behavior and identify malicious activity in real time. The idea of an AI firewall is gaining traction too. It would specifically inspect and filter traffic going to and from LLMs, adding a new layer of defense in this evolving landscape.
Let's not forget about the geopolitical climate, which continues to have a huge impact on cybersecurity. A foreign policy report on March 25th indicated that Russia has significantly increased its artillery shell production, and they're now outpacing the West. What are the implications of this from a cyber perspective?
Well, when you see an increase in physical conflict, there's often a corresponding increase in cyber activity too. As geopolitical tensions rise, so does the likelihood of state-sponsored cyber attacks. They might target critical infrastructure, government agencies, even private companies that are seen as supporting the other side. Being prepared for nation-state level cyber attacks is not some fringe concern anymore. It's a core part of managing risk in today's world.
Absolutely. So what can organizations do? Well, they need to prioritize threat intelligence partnerships. That's how they can gain insights into the tactics that nation-state actors are using. And they need to conduct tabletop exercises that specifically simulate geopolitical cyber attack scenarios. That's how you rigorously test your incident response plans and make sure you're resilient.
And on a related note, the Spanish Prime Minister, Sanchez, announced on March 26th that he's pushing for the creation of a joint EU defense fund. For anyone listening who's operating within the EU, this has some significant cybersecurity implications.
Interesting. How so?
Well, if you have increased defense collaboration at the EU level, it's likely to extend into the cyber domain as well. This could lead to stricter and more harmonized cybersecurity regulations across the EU, particularly when it comes to how technology and data flow between member states.
So EU-based organizations need to be proactive here. They should stay aligned with the latest directives from ENISA, the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, and they should prepare for a potential increase in defense-oriented cybersecurity funding and all the compliance requirements that are likely to come with it.
Exactly. Being prepared is key.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about the economic realities that are influencing security spending. The Federal Reserve decided to keep interest rates steady on March 19th. They cited ongoing inflation linked to tariffs and warned of some uncertain months ahead, next then. And on top of that, U.S. consumer confidence took a big dip in March. How do all these macroeconomic factors affect how we approach cybersecurity investments?
Well, when capital's tight and companies are being more careful about spending, cybersecurity investments need to demonstrate a clear and measurable return on investment. They need to directly address real business risks. The days of just buying the latest security gadget because it's shiny and new are over. You need a solid business case.
Right, so we need to prioritize security investments that actually reduce operational risk, that improve compliance in a tangible way, and that can be clearly presented as enhancing the overall resilience of the business, maybe even contributing to cost savings in the long run.
Exactly. You need to be able to connect cybersecurity initiatives directly to improvements in the bottom line and overall business stability. That's how you're going to get the funding you need in the current economic climate.
So, stepping back and looking at everything we've discussed today, there's some key strategic takeaways for CISOs and CIOs. First, the sheer speed and sophistication of AI-driven threats mean we need equally advanced AI-powered defenses. Second, basic infrastructure hygiene, especially diligent patching, remains absolutely critical. Those vulnerabilities in Kubernetes and Cisco and those claims around Oracle really drive that point home. Third, secure browser technologies are no longer niche solutions. They're becoming essential parts of a robust security architecture. And finally, those escalating global geopolitical tensions directly translate into a heightened risk of cyber warfare, and that risk is here to stay.
You know, our full Cyber Intel report, which is available to our paid subscribers, goes into much more detail on all these critical areas. We've developed a comprehensive return on mitigation framework to help you justify security spending. We highlight important regulatory compliance deadlines coming up in 2025. We offer practical guidance on implementing a zero-trust architecture. We explore strategies for building a human-centered security culture within your organization. And we even include a deep-dive case study of the recent Bybit exchange attack, which resulted in a $1.5 billion loss. It's packed with analysis and insights that we just don't have time for in this briefing.
So to wrap things up, the intelligence we've uncovered this week underscores a fundamental truth about cybersecurity. Our digital world is becoming more interconnected every day. And that means a single vulnerability, if exploited, can have a ripple effect, with potentially catastrophic consequences. Security can't be an afterthought. It needs to be built into our systems from the ground up. And it needs to constantly adapt to the changing threat landscape. We have to shift our focus away from simply defending the perimeter. We need to build resilient foundations that can withstand those inevitable breaches. The news this week is a stark reminder that this is no longer optional, it's an absolute necessity. Host, speaker, news anchor voice. This has been your Cybersecurity HQ Weekly News Report for March 26, 2025. Host, speaker, news anchor voice. The threats may be relentless, but knowledge and decisive action are your most powerful weapons. We've given you a high-level overview of these critical developments. But each of these topics, from Kubernetes security to AI-driven attacks and the complexities of geopolitical cyber warfare, deserves much more in-depth analysis.
So, what are your biggest concerns right now within your organization? What questions are you and your team struggling with in light of all this intelligence? And remember, Cybersecurity HQ is more than just a news source. We're a community of over 70,000 cybersecurity professionals. We offer in-depth reports, a curated weekly newsletter to keep you informed, and a dedicated job board to help connect talent with opportunity in the cybersecurity field. Visit Cybersecurity HQ today and become part of the conversation. See you next week.